July 1942. Somewhere in the Libyan desert, 200 miles behind Rommel's front line. A standard American Willys Jeep, built to carry 4 men and a few crates of supplies, rolls across the open sand, carrying something its designers never intended. 5 Vickers K machine guns are bolted to improvised steel mounts. A dozen jerry cans of fuel and water are strapped to every available surface, with more lashed to the sides. Ammunition drums fill the space where passengers should sit. The springs are compressed flat. The chassis groans under nearly double its rated weight. 3 men ride crammed between fuel, guns, and sand, navigating by sun compass across featureless terrain. It looks like a junkyard on wheels, and over the next 12 months, vehicles exactly like this one will burn hundreds of Axis aircraft on the ground, far beyond what their tiny numbers should have allowed. This is the SAS Armed Jeep. It is the weapon that proved a 4-man crew in a modified car could deliver the same results as a full bomber raid at a fraction of the cost, with almost no casualties. To understand why the British built this mechanical Frankenstein, you need to understand what they were losing. By mid-1942, the Luftwaffe and the Italian Regia Aeronautica often held local air superiority over the desert roads. German Stuka dive bombers struck British supply columns at will. Messerschmitt 109s swept RAF fighters from contested airspace. The numbers were punishing. For every German aircraft the RAF destroyed in the air, Britain lost pilots, fuel, and machines it could not easily replace. Bombing enemy airfields from the air was the obvious counter, but high-altitude raids against dispersed desert airstrips were expensive and inaccurate. Aircraft parked on desert sand, spread across miles of open ground, made poor targets for conventional bombers flying at 10,000 feet. You were essentially trying to hit a speck of dust in a sandbox with a dumb bomb. The cost per aircraft destroyed was enormous compared to the result. Lieutenant David Stirling, a Scots Guards officer recovering from a parachute training accident, proposed a different approach in July 1941. His logic was ruthless. An aircraft is hardest to destroy when it is flying at 300 miles an hour. It is easiest to destroy when it is parked, cold, and unguarded. Small teams of highly trained men, inserted behind enemy lines, could walk onto these poorly guarded desert airfields at night and destroy aircraft on the ground using hand-placed explosives. He secured approval from General Claude Auchinleck, Commander-in-Chief Middle East, to form L Detachment, Special Air Service Brigade. The name was deliberately misleading, designed to support a deception operation, making Axis intelligence believe a full British parachute brigade existed in Egypt. Stirling assembled roughly 65 men at Kabrit, 100 miles south of Cairo, drawn primarily from the recently disbanded Lay Force Commandos. These were men who didn't fit into the polite society of the regular army. They were bored, aggressive, and looking for a fight. But the first test of the concept was a disaster. Operation Squatter launched on the night of November 16, 1941. 55 men parachuted toward German and Italian airfields at Gazala and Timimi, but nature intervened. One of the worst sandstorms in 30 years struck during the drop. Equipment containers blew away, demolition charges were soaked, men scattered across miles of featureless desert. Of the 55 who jumped, only 21 walked back. The SAS had lost over 60% of its strength and destroyed 0 aircraft.
A later after-action assessment concluded it was inadvisable to carry out any more parachute operations in the Western Desert owing to changeable weather and casualties on landing. But what happened next changed everything. The survivors were collected by the Long-Range Desert Group, the LRDG. This was a specialist reconnaissance unit operating deep behind enemy lines in modified Chevrolet trucks. Captain David Lloyd Owen offered to deliver SAS teams to their targets by vehicle instead of parachute. Stirling accepted. Within 1 month, foot infiltration raids delivered by LRDG transport achieved results that justified the entire program. On December 14, 1941, Lieutenant Paddy Mayne led 6 men against Thamet airfield. They carried a new weapon called the Lewis bomb, designed by Lieutenant Jock Lewis. This elegant device combined 1 pound of plastic explosive with 1/4 pound of thermite and a small amount of diesel oil, all detonated by a time pencil fuse. Weighing roughly 1 pound each, a single man could carry enough to destroy a dozen aircraft. The thermite component ignited aviation fuel on contact, turning each charge into both a blast and an incendiary weapon. Placed inside cockpits or on wings near fuel tanks, a Lewis bomb turned a parked aircraft into a fireball. Mayne's team placed their charges and walked away. 24 planes were destroyed, 0 SAS casualties. According to the SAS War Diary, the method proved devastatingly repeatable. Over the following weeks, Mayne returned to Thamet and destroyed a further 27 aircraft. Lieutenant Bill Fraser's 5-man team hit Ajdabiya airfield and claimed 37, though Italian records examined after the war confirmed the actual figure was closer to roughly 20, still a staggering return on investment. But then the Germans adapted. By mid-1942, according to veteran accounts, sentries had been posted on individual aircraft. Silent infiltration was becoming costly. Guards, floodlights, and machine gun emplantments now ringed desert airstrips that had previously relied on their isolation for protection. When silent infiltration meant knifing sentries one by one before placing charges, the entire logic of the operation changed. It was becoming too slow and too dangerous. The SAS needed a weapon that could substitute speed and overwhelming firepower for stealth. A weapon system that could destroy the same number of aircraft in minutes rather than hours from the relative safety of a moving vehicle. The Armed Jeep was that weapon.
Beginning in July 1942, the SAS acquired its own fleet of Willys MB Jeeps, ending their dependence on the LRDG for transport. The base vehicle was straightforward, a 4-cylinder flathead engine producing 60 horsepower, 4-wheel drive through a 2-speed transfer case with a top speed of 65 miles per hour on roads and around 45 across open desert. Standard dry weight was roughly 2,300 pounds. What the SAS did to it was anything but straightforward. The defining modification was the Vickers K machine gun. Officially designated the Vickers gas-operated, this weapon fired .303 British ammunition at a cyclic rate of roughly 1,200 rounds per minute, 3 times faster than the standard Bren gun used by the infantry. It fed from flat 100-round drum magazines, meaning a brief burst could pump dozens of incendiary and tracer rounds into a parked aircraft before the gunner needed to swap drums. According to accounts from SAS veterans recorded after the war, Stirling selected the Vickers K specifically because it had been designed as an aircraft defensive weapon. He reasoned that a gun built to destroy airplanes in the air would work just as well against airplanes on the ground.
The SAS sourced these guns from scrapped RAF aircraft. The Vickers K had originally armed bombers like the Fairey Battle and Bristol Blenheim, but was being phased out in favor of belt-fed Brownings. Obsolete airframes sitting in Egyptian scrapyards yielded weapons that were officially unaccounted for in quartermaster records. A typical armed Jeep mounted 3 to 5 of these guns. Twin Vickers K guns sat on a swivel pedestal beside the front passenger. Another pair covered the rear arc. Sometimes a single gun was fixed near the driver's position. Some vehicles also carried a .50 caliber Browning heavy machine gun for use against armored targets. Desert survival modifications were equally critical. Windscreens were removed entirely to eliminate sun glare that could betray a vehicle's position from miles away. Radiator grills were cut open to improve cooling in temperatures exceeding 45 degrees Celsius. 8 to 12 additional jerry cans were strapped to every surface, hood, sides, rear, extending the range from the standard 200 miles to over 400. Water condensers, a design borrowed from LRDG founder Major Ralph Bagnold, captured radiator boil-off and fed it back into the cooling system, because in the deep desert, even water for the engine was life. Navigation relied on the Bagnold Sun Compass, a simple graduated disc with a vertical needle that provided a continuous true bearing while driving. It was unaffected by the magnetic interference of the engine and the massive amount of steel weaponry bolted to the chassis, which made standard compasses unreliable. Fully loaded with guns, fuel, water, ammunition, rations, sand channels, and camouflage nets, a single SAS Raider Jeep weighed between 3,800 and 4,200 pounds. Now, before we see how this overloaded machine performed in combat, if you're enjoying this deep dive into British military innovation, hit subscribe. It costs nothing, takes a second, and helps the channel grow. Right, let's get into the combat record. The proof came on the night of July 26, 1942, at Sidi Haneish airfield. 18 armed jeeps carrying roughly 60 SAS men, navigated by Mike Sadler using celestial observation and sun compass bearings, crossed 50 miles of open desert at night without headlights. As the column approached the airfield perimeter, the unexpected happened. German runway lights activated. A Luftwaffe bomber was coming in to land, unintentionally illuminating every parked aircraft on the strip. Stirling fired a green signal flare. The jeeps entered in a V formation, the right column engaging targets on the right side, the left column raking everything on the left. According to the SAS War Diary, the entire assault lasted roughly 15 minutes. 37 aircraft were destroyed, including Junkers 87 Stukas, Junkers 52 transports, and Messerschmitt 109 fighters. The SAS lost one man during the raid itself, Lance Bombardier John Robson, age 21, killed at his machine gun. A second man, French SAS volunteer André Zernheld, was killed by a Stuka attack during the withdrawal. The following day, 15 of the 18 jeeps returned safely. To put that in perspective, a single 15-minute pass by 18 jeeps achieved a result comparable to a full RAF bombing operation, without losing a single aircraft, consuming a fraction of the fuel, and at the cost of one man killed in action. Other raids using armed jeeps delivered similar results. At Buarat in early July 1942, the first ever drive-in jeep raid claimed aircraft losses in the mid-30s. When Lewis bombs alone proved insufficient, the guns were used to finish the job. This improvisation confirmed the jeep's potential as an assault weapon, not merely transport. At El Daba, Paddy Mayne's Jeep convoy claimed 14 aircraft destroyed against significantly upgraded German security, proving the method still worked even when the enemy expected it. The total number of Axis aircraft destroyed by the SAS across the North African campaign remains genuinely disputed. Damian Lewis, writing for the Imperial War Museum, cites 387 proven, with a probable total of 450. A careful estimate accounting for verified figures suggests 250 to 370 aircraft destroyed by all British Special Forces in North Africa, with SAS operations accounting for the clear majority. Among individuals, Paddy Mayne reportedly accounted for between 100 and 130 aircraft across the campaign, more planes destroyed on the ground than many RAF fighter aces shot down in the air. Stirling himself was captured in January 1943 during an operation in Tunisia, ending his personal war but not the unit he created. Mayne took command and continued armed jeep operations through North Africa and into the European theatre, where SAS jeeps operated behind German lines in France after D-Day. But what matters more than the exact figure is what no other nation achieved. Germany's nearest equivalent, the Brandenburgers, used standard vehicles purely for transportation. They specialized in deception and infiltration, seizing bridges in enemy uniforms, not vehicle-based direct assault. The concept of mounting concentrated automatic firepower onto a light car and driving it through an enemy airfield simply did not exist in German, American, or Soviet doctrine during the war. No German unit, no American formation, and no Soviet Special Operations Group developed anything comparable until years after observing British results. The LRDG's own Chevrolet 30 hundredweight trucks offered greater payload and range, but their two-wheel drive, heavier weight, and larger turning radius made them suited to reconnaissance and long-range patrol rather than the violent, close-range combat that SAS Jeep tactics demanded. The Jeep's four-wheel drive and compact wheelbase allowed it to weave between rows of parked aircraft at speed, a capability no truck could match.
The legacy of the SAS Armed Jeep stretches directly to the vehicles British Special Forces use today. When the SAS reformed for the Malayan emergency in 1950, the armed Land Rover replaced the Willys as the standard patrol vehicle. By 1968, the concept had evolved into the Pink Panther, a modified Land Rover Series 2A built by Marshalls of Cambridge. It was fitted with machine gun mounts, massive fuel capacity, and sand recovery equipment, all painted in a pale pink desert camouflage, which was found to be the most effective color for the specific light conditions of the desert at dawn and dusk. 72 were built. According to Ministry of Defense records, they served from the Dhofar Rebellion in Oman through the 1991 Gulf War. Today's Super Cat Jackal, the current British Special Operations vehicle with over 500 in service since 2007, carries a 12.7mm heavy machine gun, a 7.62mm general-purpose machine gun, and a 40mm automatic grenade launcher. It reaches 80 miles per hour with a range exceeding 500 miles and deploys by Chinook helicopter. Every design decision on that modern vehicle, mobility over armor, concentrated firepower on a lightweight platform, autonomous long-range operations, can be traced directly back to those improvised jeeps in the Libyan desert. Rommel reportedly called Stirling the Phantom Major, though this attribution comes primarily from biographies and may be embellished. But what is documented in German field intelligence reports from 1942 is the increasing diversion of resources to airfield defense. This included anti-vehicle obstacles and mobile patrols specifically tasked with hunting SAS raiders. Every guard posted on every aircraft, every searchlight installed, every machine gun emplacement dug around a desert airstrip represented resources pulled directly away from the front line.
By late 1942, the Axis was reportedly dedicating entire infantry companies to static airfield defense in rear areas, where before the SAS, a single watchman with a torch had sufficed. This defensive multiplication effect meant the strategic impact of the armed Jeep extended far beyond the aircraft it physically destroyed. It forced Rommel to weaken his front line to protect his rear, a dilemma no conventional British unit could have imposed with the same economy of force. The mathematics were stark. A single armed Jeep cost a fraction of what a single Luftwaffe fighter cost to build, train a pilot for, and maintain. Yet one Jeep crew in one night could remove multiple fighters from the war permanently. Replacing skilled pilots was harder still. The exchange rate between British investment and German loss was so lopsided that the armed Jeep arguably delivered a higher return per pound spent than any other weapon system in the North African theater. That overloaded, spring-crushed, stripped-down Willys Jeep, the one that looked like it might collapse under the weight of its own weaponry, turned out to be one of the most cost-effective weapon platforms of the entire war. 4 men, 5 guns, one vehicle the factory never designed to carry any of it. Germany spent millions building the aircraft that lined those desert airstrips. Britain spent almost nothing destroying them. That is not luck. That is British operational innovation, turning borrowed equipment into a weapon system no other nation conceived of, let alone matched. If you enjoyed this detailed look at the SAS Jeep, make sure to subscribe for more insights into military history. Thanks for watching.